The rain was pouring like the sky itself was weeping when she first walked into the grand hospital room, trembling, soaked, and clutching her nursing file close to her chest. No one knew her name, no one cared. To the world, she was just another quiet nurse trying to survive another shift. But that night, that very ordinary night, destiny was watching. Because within the next few hours, her small act of kindness would change her life forever, and melt the heart of a man who believed his world had no room for love. If you believe that kindness still has power in this world, that even small hearts can bring light into the darkest souls, then take a deep breath, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to StoryNest for more stories that restore faith in humanity. Her name was Mira Evans, a 26-year-old nurse who carried her shyness like a fragile armor. She had grown up in a small town, where words often failed her and silence became her comfort. But beneath her soft-spoken demeanor was a heart that felt everything, every pain, every sorrow, every unspoken cry around her. Nursing, for her, wasn't just a job. It was her way of listening to the world in the language of care. It had been only 3 weeks since she was transferred to St. Haven Private Hospital, a place known not for its warmth, but for the money and influence of the people who came through its doors. That morning, she had been assigned to a VIP patient, an elderly woman recovering from surgery. The file read, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, 68. Condition, stable. Communication, nonverbal, deaf. Mira paused when she read that. Her heart fluttered in a strange way. Her mother, too, had lost her hearing when Mira was 14. It was during those years that Mira learned sign language, not out of duty, but out of love, so her mother would never feel alone. Maybe that's why she felt a quiet pull toward this patient, though she didn't know then who Mrs. Sterling really was. When she entered the lavish private suite, she was greeted not by the hum of machines or chatter of nurses, but by silence, that deep, almost sacred kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Mrs. Sterling sat near the window, her frail hands resting on her lap, her eyes distant. The world had muted itself around her. Mira smiled softly, walked in, and placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. When Mrs. Sterling looked up, startled by the touch, Mira did something no one else in the hospital had done in weeks. She raised her hands, and began to speak in sign language. Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. My name is Mira. I'll be your nurse today. The old woman's eyes widened, filling with tears that didn't need words. For the first time since her surgery, someone had spoken to her, not at her, but with her. She reached out and touched Mira's cheek, trembling with gratitude. Neither of them knew that behind the half-open door, someone had been watching. In that silent, sacred exchange of hands and hearts, stood Ethan Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, and Mrs. Sterling's only son. A man known across cities as ruthless, disciplined, and emotionally unreachable. His entire empire was built on precision, on silence of a different kind, one born from control, not compassion. But as he stood there, watching the young nurse speak in the same language his mother had long been deprived of, something shifted inside him. For years, he had tried to buy his mother's happiness, the best doctors, the finest care, the quietest luxury. But this soft-spoken nurse had given her something no wealth could, connection. For the next few days, Mira continued her duties quietly, unaware that the CEO himself had instructed the staff to let her stay permanently assigned to his mother's care. She would read to Mrs. Sterling using gestures, sign lullabies from memory, and even bring small wildflowers from the hospital garden. Every time she signed, her hands moved with such tenderness it felt like poetry in motion. And every evening, when the lights dimmed and the halls grew still, Ethan found himself standing at the same doorway, watching, the way a storm watches the sea, unable to move closer yet unable to look away. But Mira had her own storm to fight. Her life outside the hospital was far from easy. Her mother was ill, her bills piling up, and every paycheck vanished faster than she earned it. Her dreams were small, a little home, a little peace, yet even those seemed too far away. Still, she smiled. Still, she gave kindness like she had an endless supply. One evening, Mrs. Sterling fell seriously ill, her heart condition worsening without warning. The team rushed in, alarms blaring. Myra's hands shook as she assisted the doctors, refusing to leave the bedside even as her uniform was soaked in sweat and fear. The moment Mrs. Sterling's pulse stabilized, Mira broke down quietly, clutching the old woman's hand in relief. When Ethan arrived moments later, he found her sitting beside his unconscious mother, whispering softly as if her voice could travel through dreams. "You're not alone, Mrs. Sterling. Please hold on." He didn't speak. He just stood there, heart pounding, watching the woman who had been nothing but a face among thousands of hospital staff, and realizing she had just become someone he couldn't forget. Days passed. Mrs. Sterling began to recover. When she finally regained full strength, she insisted on having lunch in the hospital garden, with Mira beside her. It was there that Ethan approached them for the first time, his presence commanding yet uncertain. Mira froze when she saw him. Everyone knew who he was, the man behind the hospital's donations, the billionaire CEO with eyes like winter. Ethan thanked her, not with cold formality, but with something rare for him, sincerity. He told her he had watched her kindness, her patience, her gentleness, and that he wanted to do something for her in return. But Mira refused politely. "You don't owe me anything, sir. Your mother reminded me of mine." That one sentence broke something inside him. In the weeks that followed, Ethan found excuses to visit his mother more often. And each time, his visits coincided with Myra's shifts. He'd stand near the door, pretending to check medical reports, but really he was just listening to laughter he hadn't heard in years, watching hands that spoke without sound, feeling warmth he'd long forgotten. For a man who owned everything, he had never felt so poor, until her presence filled the spaces money couldn't reach. As their paths crossed more often, Ethan began to see life through Myra's eyes, the little things she noticed, the small joys she cherished, the pain she carried silently. He found himself drawn to her simplicity, her courage, her quiet strength. But Mira didn't know how to handle his attention. She was shy, humble, unaccustomed to being seen. When Ethan offered to pay for her mother's medical treatment, she refused again, and that only made him respect her more. She didn't want charity, she wanted dignity. Then, one evening, tragedy struck again. Myra's mother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Ethan found her sitting in the hospital chapel, her head bowed, her eyes red from tears. For the first time, he didn't hold back. He sat beside her in silence, no words, no comfort, just shared stillness. Later that week, Mrs. Sterling requested to see Mira once more before she was discharged. She took Myra's hands in hers and signed with trembling fingers, "My son has lived in silence of another kind, the silence of loneliness. Don't be afraid to let him hear the sound of kindness again." Myra's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand then that Mrs. Sterling's words were more than gratitude, they were a blessing. Months passed. Life returned to its rhythm, but Ethan couldn't forget her. One day, he visited the hospital under the guise of a CEO health inspection, though everyone knew it wasn't business. When he finally saw Mira again, tending to a child in the pediatric ward, something inside him settled. He didn't say much. He just watched her sign something to the little girl who couldn't speak, the same way she had with his mother, and smiled. That moment told him everything he needed to know about her heart. A few weeks later, Mira received an invitation, not from a patient, but from the Sterling Foundation. It was an offer for a new position, Director of Patient Communication and Care Programs, a project funded personally by Ethan Sterling, designed to help hospitals train staff in empathy and sign language for patients with disabilities. She was stunned. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what it meant. Her kindness had started something far bigger than she ever imagined. The next time they met, Ethan told her softly, "You taught me something money never could, how to listen without words." And there, in the quiet garden where it had all begun, the shy nurse and the once cold millionaire stood in silence, a silence filled not with distance, but with understanding. Sometimes, the loudest conversations happen in the quietest moments. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the magic of compassion and second chances, please like, share, and subscribe to StoryNest. Every gesture helps us spread more warmth into the world.